You may have heard this week in the news, Catholicism in the news, and any time it is in the news, you have to know, of course, that it's probably going to be wrong. And the news is going to be wrong about our Catholic faith. And so, of course, Pope Francis was returning from World Youth Day and decided to have an open press conference with the press corps. And at one point on the way during that press conference, Pope Francis, basically the question came up about homosexuality and the Catholic Church's teaching on it. And Pope Francis was sort of talking and just giving an answer off the cuff. You can find the whole thing. But there was a line that the media picked up on, which was where Pope Francis said, if someone is trying to live a holy life and is seeking God, who am I to judge them? And so, of course, as expected, the headlines, Pope Francis changes church teaching. Decides now that basically Catholics are not going to be judges, which apparently the media believes that at some point up until then, it said in the Catechism that we were supposed to be to judge other people of their sins. And of course this comes up as well in our gospel, and it's really important. Not even just setting aside the topic for the moment about homosexuality and just focusing on this topic of judgment. It's crucial that we get and understand as Catholics what we believe about all of this. And because again, it comes up in tonight's gospel. It seems like every time you need to preach on something, it's in the gospel. But anyways, Jesus says in tonight's gospel, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" Jesus is sitting there saying, I'm not here in this moment to judge. And that's exactly the exact quote that Pope Francis said on the plane. Who am I to judge? God did not appoint me as the judge. And so, again, sadly, people hear that and and the news media, which seems to fail to understand Catholicism at every corner, again said that that is a change in church teaching. Here's why this is important. Because Jesus in the gospel at the very end, right before he goes into heaven, he tells his apostles and his disciples, your job is to go and preach the gospel to all the nations. Your job, and then again it extends to us. Our jobs as Christians, we are asked to go and spread the good news of the gospel to all corners of the world. And then the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we spread the gospel to the corners of the world? Because there are people who are spreading the gospel but are failing because they are not heeding the teachings of Christ. They're not heeding the teachings of the church, and they are judging. They are judging. But we are asked to not judge. Now, the problem with this, and the reason that this is so often, and the reason that the media is out there saying that the church did change its teachings, is because sometimes what happens is that people interpret us talking about what's right and what is a sin and what's not a sin and so on and so forth and how to be happy. When we talk about things that are sins, people will inevitably accuse you of judging them. They will inevitably accuse you of judging them. If I preach a homily about adultery or any other sin, I don't name any names. I don't focus on one single person and stare at them the whole time. I don't do any of that. Somebody will probably still hear that and will feel as if I am judging them. We can't help that. There's nothing we can do about that. All we can do is what St. Paul said, which is to preach the truth with love. If we do that, then we're fine. And we're doing exactly what Jesus says, and we're doing exactly what Pope Francis says, and we're doing exactly what the church has always said. We are preaching and spreading the gospel, and we're doing it with love. At the same time, we can't let people accusing us of judging them stop us from doing what we are asked to do. I'm asked to talk about, we are all asked to help people in our lives understand where sin is in their life. Why? Because sin makes people miserable. It's a burden. It weighs us down. It leads to pain and suffering, and only pain and suffering. And so if I truly love these people, then I have to talk about, I have to spread an awareness of what's right and what's wrong. And the crazy thing is that Jesus asks people who are sinners, us, to do that. So even though I sin, I'm supposed to also at the same time talk about and spread an awareness of sin and help people not fall into that trap. And I'm supposed to do it with love. Now I do that all the time electronically. I have the blog that I keep, so on and so forth, Facebook, those sorts of things, trying to, again, reach people as Jesus asks. Inevitably, people will accuse me all the time, you're judging me. I don't know who you are. How can I judge you? I'm talking about what the church teaches to be a sin. That's not me judging. So that is like supposed to be today the ultimate shutdown. If you're talking about your faith, or you're talking to someone about what's wrong, and what's the sin, and what leads to misery in their life, if they get to the point where they'll just retaliate and they'll tell you, don't judge me. I'm not judging you. I saw it all the time in high school. When I was with the high school kids, they'd all the time yell at each other, don't judge me. Not judging. But we are asked to talk about what's right and what's wrong so that people will avoid pain and misery. And that is the task that we've been given. We are to judge no one. The church has never come out and said, so-and-so is in hell. The church has never done that. Because we are not the judge. There is one judge, and he will judge at the end of time. Our job is to make sure that as many people as possible come out on the right side of that judgment. So continue to preach the gospel. Continue to do it with love in the ways that you know how to do. Christ promised us, when you're in those situations and you don't know what to say, I will send my Holy Spirit and He will speak through you. Preach, teach, help people know what's right and wrong in your life, in your circle of influence. Do it with love, and don't let the people who accuse you of judging them slow you down.